You know that strange feeling. You open your laptop. The project is right there. The assignment is waiting. The workout clothes are already laid out. And somehow, 20 minutes later, you're watching videos you'll barely remember tomorrow. It's frustrating because you know exactly what you should be doing. So why aren't you doing it? Most people call this laziness. I call that a lie. Here is the truth. Your brain doesn't actually care if a task is important. It's only asking one thing. Is this worth the energy right now? That one question decides whether you finally start or spend another day putting your life on hold. And once you understand how your brain answers it, getting yourself to do difficult things becomes dramatically easier. Not because you'll suddenly have more discipline, because you'll finally stop working against the very way you are wired. Here's how you crack the code. Principle 1. The hidden system running your decisions. Think about the last time you drove to work or a friend's house. You probably didn't spend the drive thinking about exactly how much pressure to put on the brake or the precise angle of the steering wheel. You simply got in the car, and before you knew it, you were there. That's because your brain has automated the process. Neuroscientists often point to a network involving the basal ganglia as one of the systems responsible for habits and routines. Once behaviors become familiar, they require surprisingly little mental effort. Now compare that with writing an important email, learning a new language, starting a business. These aren't automatic. They rely heavily on your prefrontal cortex, the area behind your forehead that's deeply involved in planning, decision-making, and self-control. The catch? That part of your brain is incredibly powerful, but it comes with a cost. It burns mental energy. That's why after a day filled with difficult decisions, even simple tasks can suddenly feel impossible. You've probably experienced this. By evening, choosing something to watch on Netflix or putting away the dishes feels harder than solving a complicated problem at work that morning. It's not because the house suddenly got messier. It's because your mental battery is empty. Principle 2. Why easy wins every time now. Here's where things get really interesting. Behavioral scientist B.J. Fogg from Stanford proposed a simple model explaining why we act or don't. Behavior happens when three things come together: motivation, ability, a prompt. And one of the biggest factors affecting ability is how difficult something feels. Think about social media for a second. One swipe, tiny effort, instant entertainment. Now compare that to reading 30 pages of a textbook. The reward might be enormous months from now, but your brain doesn't live months from now. It lives in this moment. Researchers studying decision-making have repeatedly found that humans naturally discount future rewards. Psychologists call this temporal discounting. In other words, a small reward today often feels more valuable than a much bigger reward later. That's why procrastination isn't usually a motivation problem. It's an effort problem. The good news? You can't always make a reward arrive sooner, but you can absolutely make the effort feel smaller. And that's where everything starts to change. Principle 3. Shrink the mountain until your brain says yes. Here's something most people don't talk about. When we plan a goal, we imagine the finish line. When our brain sees the goal, it imagines the entire climb. Want to write a book? Your brain pictures hundreds of pages. Want to lose weight? It imagines months of discipline. Want to launch a business? It sees endless uncertainty. No wonder it resists. Now imagine the exact opposite. Instead of write the chapter, the first task becomes open the document. That's it. Then write one sentence, then another. It almost feels ridiculous, but that's exactly why it works. Video game designers understand motivation better than almost anyone. They don't start you on the hardest level. They give you small wins first. Every win makes you want to keep going. Psychologists call this the progress principle. Research by Teresa Amabile and Stephen Kramer found that one of the strongest drivers of motivation at work is simply making meaningful progress, even small progress. Your brain doesn't need giant victories. It needs proof of momentum. Think about the last time you moved. If you stood in your living room thinking about packing every box, cleaning every room, and unpacking everything in your new place, you'd probably want to give up before you even started. So instead, you pack one drawer, then one box, then one shelf, one small win after another. Before you know it, the house is packed. Not because you tackled the entire move at once, because you only ever asked yourself to do one small thing next. Principle 4. The one word that changes everything. Now let's talk about something even more subtle. Language. Imagine saying this to yourself. I have to work out. Now compare it with this. I choose to work out. Same workout, same body, same amount of effort, Completely different emotional reaction. Why? Because human beings have a deep psychological need for autonomy. According to the self-determination theory, people become far more motivated when they feel they're acting from choice instead of pressure. Your brain naturally pushes back against control, even when you're the one doing the controlling. That's why phrases like, I have to, I should, I must, often create invisible resistance. Instead, try asking yourself, what am I choosing by doing this? Maybe you're choosing better health. Maybe you're choosing peace of mind tomorrow. Maybe you're choosing confidence. Feel the difference. You're no longer obeying. You're deciding. That small mental change often makes a surprisingly big difference. Principle 5. Stop chasing motivation. Start running experiments. One of the biggest mistakes people make is treating every new habit like a lifelong commitment. I'm going to meditate every day. I'll never eat sugar again. I'm waking up at 5 forever. Your brain hears forever and quietly panics. The people who stay consistent don't make bigger promises. They make smaller ones. Instead of making promises, they run experiments. Try this. I'm going to read for 15 minutes every night for the next 10 days. That's manageable. It's temporary. It's measurable. And because it has an ending, your brain is much less likely to resist. Behavioral researchers consistently find that achievable goals build confidence, while impossible goals often destroy it. You're collecting evidence. Evidence that you're someone who follows through. That's much more valuable than chasing perfection. Principle 6. Become the person who finishes. There's something fascinating about identity. Every promise you keep to yourself becomes a vote for the kind of person you believe you are. Finish a small commitment. You prove something to yourself. Finish another. Now it's becoming part of who you are. Eventually something changes. You stop saying, I'm trying to become disciplined. Instead, you quietly think, I'm someone who finishes what I start. That identity becomes incredibly powerful, because once people genuinely see themselves a certain way, their behavior naturally begins to match it. Not perfectly, but consistently. And consistency always beats intensity. Principle 7. The small shift that changes your future. Maybe the biggest lesson isn't about productivity at all. It's about compassion. So many people spend years believing they're broken because difficult things feel difficult. But effort isn't the enemy. Poor design is. I want you to try something. It'll take less than a minute. Think of one thing you've been putting off. Maybe it's sending that email, starting a workout, organizing your finances, or finally beginning that project. Now don't think about finishing it. Just ask yourself, what's the smallest action I can take in the next 2 minutes? Not 20 minutes, not an hour, 2 minutes. Maybe it's opening the document, putting on your workout shoes, writing the first sentence, or simply placing the bills on the table. Then stop reading this script in your mind for a second and picture yourself doing just that one tiny action. Notice what happens. The resistance usually starts to fade because your brain isn't looking at the whole mountain anymore. It's only looking at the next step. And once you've taken that step, the next one almost always feels easier. That's how momentum begins, not with a huge burst of motivation, but with one decision that's so small, your brain can't find a good reason to say no. Here is my advice. Turn every project into a short experiment instead of a lifelong contract. You're not trying to outsmart your future. You're creating conditions where your brain naturally wants to cooperate. And maybe that's the question worth leaving you with. Stop asking yourself, how can I become more disciplined? Start asking, how can I make the next step impossible to say no to? Because that's where real change begins.